All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining me and supporting me in my research. My name is Ramirez Diaz, and today I will be presenting on how Russian women utilized organizational power during the revolution of 1917. I would like to thank my mentor, Dr. Georg Michaels, for supporting me throughout this process and encouraging me to present here today. My research focuses on women's efforts to organize and find a voice of their own during the Russian Revolution of 1917. I have been drawn to this topic because of the current precarious position of our rights as women in the United States. We are being challenged, and perhaps the revolutionary struggle of Russian women can inspire us. This topic is very important to be discussing today. So a little bit of introduction. The purpose of my research was to uncover and understand how women during the Russian Revolution of 1917 were able to utilize organizational power in significant sectors of society. I focus on the female workforce, women's efforts to obtain basic citizen rights, including the right to vote, as well as women serving underrepresented communities. During my research, I discovered that the use of organizational power was vital. Spearheaded by the Revolution of 1917, Russian women were able to break barriers that had long been put in place by the old imperial regime. Through analysis of primary sources that included letters and firsthand accounts, I explored how Russian women were able to use organizational power and have their voices heard. They were now recognized as important citizens of Russian society. Women realized that this was the time to organize and their opportunity to be seen and heard. They joined and formed many organizations during those revolutionary years. Some of the letters and accounts that I focus on included petitions sent to several Russian newspapers during the revolution. I also found women's petitions that were read at political conventions and at union meetings of the working sector. And right here, this picture is actually about on February 23rd, 1917, which was what started the revolution. And one of the quotes from one of the banners reads, "If the woman is a slave, there will be no freedom. Long live the equality of women." So what was the focus of my research? It was in a couple sectors in the workforce to gain rights, political power, and to serve underrepresented communities. The focus of my research was to look at all sectors in which organizational power was utilized. I focus on 4 areas of organizational power. First, women workers pushing for better working conditions. Second, the countless women organizations that pushed for the right to vote through appeals and letters. The right to vote was finally established in July 1917. And third, women are able to solidify their power as political leaders and activists. Finally, women were committed to serving underrepresented communities by providing education and support to the lower class and peasants of their communities. Clearly, women are no longer silenced. They openly express their needs and wants. By utilizing organizations, they were able to enter many spaces that in the past had been occupied predominantly by men. And here, this picture is another picture of women protesting in the streets of Petrograd, which would turn into the revolution of 1917. So my first focus was the workforce. And on International Women's Day on February 23rd, 1917, everything came to a head, and women's protests and strikes turned into a revolution. This historic day is a clear example of how working class women utilize organizational power to make their voices heard. In the morning of this day, thousands of women left their factories and flooded the streets of Petrograd to protest against bread prices and shortages of food. These women workers then encouraged their male counterparts to unite with them. Within 3 days, 3,000 Russian workers and students, both women and men, were protesting. They essentially took over the capital of the Russian Empire. Tsar Nicholas called in the army to stop the protesting. In the beginning, soldiers obeyed and fired into the crowds, but eventually soldiers of the Petrograd garrison began to mutiny and turn their weapons against the Tsarist regime. Tsar Nicholas was forced to abdicate on February 28, 1917. Thus, by organizing and protesting in the streets, women had single-handedly started a powerful revolution that would forever end imperial rule in Russia. And this is one of the quotes. It says, "Hand in hand with you to improve our common working lives, to make this life more beautiful and pure and bright for ourselves, for our children, and for the whole working class. This, it seems to me, is the real beauty and meaning of life." And this is a quote from a working woman. Women also organized to demand better working conditions in factories. For example, women hat makers wrote a list of demands to their employers. Some of these demands included if a skilled woman worker falls ill at work, then her wages will not be deducted for 1 to 2 days. On Saturdays, Sundays, and annual holidays, there will be no work and the shops will be closed. 11, we cannot be required to take work home. Women knew this was the time to act. Their working conditions were comparable to slavery. Slavery had been abolished legally when serfdom was ended in 1861. Yet the mistreatment of not just women, but all workers continued. This experience led to the formation of many workers' unions and organizations. Through organized and increased visibility, women did gain better working conditions. In 1917, women in the workforce accounted for 43% of the workforce, as opposed to in early 1914 when they were only 26.6. This was one major reason why their voices could no longer be ignored. Now they were a crucial part of the Russian economy, and without them, there was no workforce. The second sector I worked on was to gain rights. Okay, so soldiers' wives were one of the first women to organize, to fight for the rights of their husbands and families, even before the revolution. For example, peasant women sent a petition to the war minister on May 1916. In that petition, they described the horrible situation they were being put through because of the war. Their husbands had been sent to fight in World War I, and they were left to manage the households. In one petition, they state, "What is going on? We peasant women of Russian soil have given the government our husbands, our sons, our brothers, our fathers, and now that is not enough for the government. It is going to exterminate us with hunger. No bread, no meat, no sugar, no anything. If you do not take measures, we will all rise up. Act on our demands now and do not delay. Give us bread. Down with the war. Down with the treacherous, treasonous ministers of the entire government." And here in this picture is a crowd standing in line for milk and food in Petrograd. So this petition was written just months before the events that ignited the February Revolution of 1917. The wives of soldiers were clearly fed up with the lack of protections and resources the government provided. This petition is a clear example of how women were beginning to organize to fight for rights and basic human necessities within a society that was ignoring them completely. Russian women could no longer stand by while their husbands were dying in the war in a country that could not even feed their children. Women in Russia also continued to push for women's suffrage during and after the revolution. One important organization was the League of Women's Equal Rights. In March of 1917, they passed a resolution to the Moscow Committee of Public Relations asking for 1, women must be granted full civil and political rights. All texts that formulate the rights of citizens for clarity and precision must include the formulation of both sexes. 2, women laborers must be paid equally to men's. Protections for maternity and child rearing must be introduced. 4, they must be entrusted with leadership in all matters connected to the female population's interests. 7, women must be admitted universally in all spheres of public service activity. If Russia is to become a free country, all these demands must be implemented without delay. Otherwise, it will be an open declaration that the term free citizen implies only men, and women will remain in their previous position without rights. In this resolution, the frustration of women over the complete lack of inclusion can be seen. They want to be recognized as free citizens of Russia. They want to be made leaders in matters of women's interest. They are seeking an amplification of their voices in matters that relate to women. They wanted to be able to work in sectors that had been occupied only by men, and they had been deprived of. Although the provisional government did not grant them the right to vote until July 20th of 1917, these women's energetic push for suffrage has to be recognized. In addition to the right to vote, women gained access to traditionally male professions. For example, female lawyers were now able to serve as attorneys. Women also gained the right to join the military and even become commanders. The next sector is political power. Rising political parties quickly understood that women would be crucial in order to gain political power. These parties began to appeal to women in order to gain their votes. For example, the Socialist Menshevik Party called for women's representation in the Petrograd Soviet of Workers and Soldiers, a revolutionary council that competed with the provisional government. And this was one of their calls. There are no women representing either female or male workers in the Soviet. There should be. The Tsarist regime imprisoned women workers. The serfdom-like spirit in industrial enterprise powerfully oppressed all women workers. In the great struggle for liberation, we must not forget this extra oppression against women. Comrade women workers, organized immediately. Political leaders realized that there was power in numbers, and that included women's vote. Another important political party, the Social Revolutionaries, also understood that they needed to appeal to women's causes. They emphasized that the Constituent Assembly would be based on, quote, one, elections that are universal, direct, secret, and equal for all, including women. Many Russian women were able to become political leaders and activists themselves during the revolution. My last sector was to serve underrepresented communities. Women during the revolution also used organizational power to bring service to the community. One such organization was the Zenotdel. It was the Women's Bureau. Its work included informing women of their rights. The Zenotdel also did its best to keep the question of restructuring women's everyday lives on the agenda of the revolutionary leaderships. For example, by setting up childcare centers and communal dining halls. The Zenotdel also trained women to become political leaders. Another important organization women became a part of was the Smetsovos, that is, local self-governments. Here they helped wounded soldiers and helped to feed and educate the peasants. The voices of minority women in Russia were also amplified during this time. Muslim women strove to organize and fight for their rights as women to be recognized. The Central Bureau calls on Muslim women organization to send representatives to the Moscow All-Russian Muslim Congress in May. Say yes to letting Muslim women free voices ring out. Long live free Muslim women, women citizens, and women comrades. Even minority groups understood now was the time to raise their voices. If they did not seize on this opportunity, it might go away. The call to organize was very powerful in everyday life during those revolutionary days. And here's another picture, and it reads, "Now I too, I am free." And this is a poster, a propaganda poster of Muslim women. In conclusion, Women gained increased freedoms as a result of the Russian Revolution. Russian women were finally able to have their opinions heard because of the application of organizational power. They were now regarded as valuable members of Russian society. Women realized that now was the time and place for them to speak up and become visible. During the Russian Revolution, many women joined and founded groups. They fought for their rights, gained access to greater education, and strengthened their position as political leaders and activists. They were better able to care for their families and the community as a whole. Women, above all, were no longer hushed. They were able to access several sectors that had previously been dominated by men through utilizing organizations. Women were able to have their voices heard and express their needs and wishes. It is important to continue research of women during the Revolution of 1917. Continued research would help in understanding the important role of Russian women had in society. There is only very few limited number of historical studies written about the lives of women during the Russian Revolution. But one must not forget that Russia was one of the first countries to allow women to vote. There still exist huge gaps in underrepresented communities in history, and there is lack of accessibility to resources on this topic and disregard the importance of women in history. The struggle of peasant and lower class and minority women is still much unknown in history. These histories offer rich knowledge and perspectives of the Russian Revolution and women's history. And this is my work cited. Thank you very much. I would again like to thank my faculty mentor, Dr. Garrett Michaels, and the UGRC department for all the support.
Thank you so much, Diana. You make me feel proud.